Welcome to Wellness Rebranded.
We know there is so much conflicting health and fitness advice out there.
And you're tired of the wellness fads, endless diets, and impossible standards that make you feel like nothing you do is ever enough.
You're ready to tune into your mind and body and feel empowered around health.
We're the Healing Trio, here to help you redesign your relationships with food, fitness, and yourself.
I'm Elizabeth, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor.
I'm Maria, licensed mental health therapist.
And I'm Tara, personal trainer.
Together, we're changing the narrative on health away from diet culture, hustle culture, and toxic positivity and towards healthful self-care.
So grab your water bottle, get ready to laugh, learn, and grow.
And let's start rebranding your wellness journey.
The Wellness Rebranded Podcast is like chatting with three of your friends. Elizabeth shares down-to-earth tips on mindful eating, Tara encourages you to embrace your strength, and Maria provides invaluable support for your mental well-being. There's no judgment, no impossible goals, just genuine advice that you can actually use from professionals who practice what they preach and are real and relatable. This podcast is like a breath of fresh air in the world of health and fitness. It's like having a chat with friends who genuinely care about your well-being. They cut through the noise of conflicting information, helping you focus on what really matters, feeling good in your body.
Welcome back to another episode of Wellness Rebranded. This is a super special episode because we are celebrating what, ladies?
Our 1-year anniversary!
Woohoo! If you could see Maria now, she's doing some very strange dancing.
Was that bicep dance?
It was bicep dancing.
Strange for you, sweetheart, because you don't dance, okay? This is called dancing.
Okay, but I can do that kind of dancing.
Okay.
All right, we are celebrating our 1-year anniversary today, and we have a very special episode planned for you all, which is we are going to share some of the ways that we have realized in our journey that podcasting mirrors diet culture, and maybe some lessons that may help you if you are on a journey breaking up with diet culture, but then also just lessons, some of our favorite moments from the episodes, and just some pure podcast fun and goodness, right?
Yes.
Right.
So where should we start, ladies?
Let's start with one of the ideas that you came up with, Elizabeth.
Okay.
I want to hear how podcasting mirrors diet culture.
Okay, well, I can only speak from my own personal experience, but some of the... Well, you know this, Tara, because you were in the very original meetings before the podcast kicked off. But I was like a little not sure how I felt about this because writing is my jam and speaking gives me the willies.
Wait, let me say this. When Elizabeth decided to start this podcast, because this is her idea, she came to me and was like, hey, so I'm thinking about doing podcasts. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, yep. And
I got freaked out.
She could not believe that I just agreed to something so quickly, to just, without even giving it much thought, just be like, yeah, this sounds good.
I know. It actually...
And it scared her.
It did. It made me freak out because I was like, wait, whoa, I was just floating the idea. I don't know that I'm fully committed. And you already said yes, and you heard about it 10 seconds ago. And the funny thing is that Maura, our original co-host, did exactly the same thing. So the two of them, I floated it like within actually what really happened is I asked Maura first, and she was like, yes. And then I had the same reaction of like, whoa, I don't know if I'm actually like want to do it. And I waited weeks and weeks. Well, I can't remember who I asked first, actually, but...
I don't either.
In any case, I asked one of you.
I think you asked Maura first.
And then I didn't bring it up to the other one for a long time because I wasn't sure that I was in. And then at some point I was like, all right, I'm just going to float the idea to the other one and just see what they say. And then you were immediately like, yes. And then I was like, whoa, still, I'm not sure.
So tell me in your head at that moment, what was stopping you from, if they said yes so quickly, what was the no for you?
The no for me was probably a couple things, but the loudest is I'm a perfectionist. And so, which is one of my things that echoes diet culture, actually. And I feel very, very comfortable in a writing space because I can write and rewrite and change it until I feel like it's just right. But when you're speaking, it's more off the cuff, right? And I had been on many podcasts before we launched this podcast as a guest. And I had the same reaction every time, which is I was all in, excited to do it. I wasn't nervous at all leading up to the conversation. I would have the conversation, and then I would lose sleep for weeks because I was like, whoa, it is out there in the world, and I've lost control over it. It's not my podcast. What if I didn't say that thing exactly the way that I wanted to? And I started overthinking, which anyone who really knows me will know that that's not surprising. I'm a really, really good overthinker. But so it was that. It was like, whoa, we're going to have this thing that lives out there that, A, I'm not fully in control of, right? Because there's two co-hosts who maybe like think the episode was great and I thought it was not great. So I had to let go a little bit of that. And then also...
A couple episodes come to mind.
And then also, it's a big commitment, right? So I needed to like feel as though I had space for it because if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it well.
You know, I'm happy I'm not alone with that. Because every time I did a podcast episode with somebody else before we started that, I could not listen to myself afterwards because the inner critic will come out and say, you could have explained that better. You mispronounced that word.
Yeah.
And I would be really hard on myself.
This is why I don't listen to most of our episodes.
Yeah, so that inner critic, right? Think about how loud our inner critics can become in diet culture. So talking about the overlap is enormous. And so it's interesting. So you've had that experience. Tara, and anytime I would explain it to Tara, she would say, what? I haven't thought about that. It's fine. And I always am so envious of that. Like, how are you just so comfortable and at peace with everything? It's like I truly envy that about you.
I think I'm just so type B. I'm so relaxed and laid back about most things that I'm like, hey, it's out there. I put a lot of work and effort into this thing. If it's good enough, then good. And if it's not, well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
You know, like I try not to be perfectionist because I just don't have the bandwidth to be able to carry that burden. So I just don't.
Yeah. But Maria, so I am curious because I know for me what has made that easier over time, but I'm curious how you sorted through that because I do think that inner critic is so integral to our mental, emotional well-being, our relationship with food, with our body. So in your experience, how did you get through that in the guest podcasting that you did?
I think with time, the more I did it, believe it or not, the less I would criticize myself.
Yeah.
Because I think it had to do, there was a mix of the fear of something new, and I didn't feel much comfortable with the whole interview set up and the microphone. So the more I did it, so I just thought I need to do it as much as I can to go over the fear of it. And then, just like Tara says, like just try to move from type A to type B as often as possible. And then, you know what? Maybe I say something that is not exactly how I would have said it if I could re-record, but I'm not saying anything really, really bad either. I had to start trusting my 20 years of experience talking about something and stop doubting so much what I had to say.
Yeah.
And again, not everyone is going to love what I have to say. Many people will be, okay, what she just said doesn't make sense, and that's okay. So you have to come to terms with that too.
Yeah.
That is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, what you're going to say, and that's okay.
Yeah, such a great point. I would have said largely the same thing, which is one, just the more I did it, the easier it got, right? And then having our own podcast, it was like, well, every week one's coming out, so I'm just over it. And then also, so like a little bit of exposure therapy, frankly.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the same thing, just accepting that it may not be perfect. And clearly none of us are, and that's just life and being human, and it's okay. And I think that's why, to me, there's just so many parallels about it that relate to our relationship with food or fitness or our bodies or our thoughts or ourselves, right?
I heard something the other day that said if you want to be a good writer, you have to start writing and just know that like the first however many things you write are going to be terrible. You know, you just have to accept that like it's going to be bad in the beginning, and the only way to get through it is to go through it.
Yes.
You can't just like learn a whole lot and then skip to the awesome phase. It just doesn't work like that. And I think podcasting is the same way, right? Like in the beginning, I have this memory of me and Elizabeth and Maura going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like shaking our hands and doing this whole thing that,
Shake it up.
you know, we tried to like loosen up before we came in here. And now we're just like, okay, you guys ready? All right, let's just roll. You know, like we don't even get nervous about it anymore. And I think like diet culture and fitness and wellness culture is the same way, right? Like in the beginning, like things are hard. You know, you walk into the gym and it's uncomfortable, or you don't know where the things are. And, you know, maybe you're like trying to turn down the diet noise, but everyone around you is still in full on diet culture. So like, it's just hard. And there's no way to really get around that except to just forge right ahead and go through it.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of times on the intuitive eating journey specifically, we talk about the messy middle, right? Like it's learning essentially to navigate the messy middle of letting go of diet culture and all the things that you kind of have been taught about food in your body, and then also working towards trusting yourself. But in a way, that's a bit of I don't know if misnomer is the right word, but like it's a false setup, because it's not like there's this end that isn't messy, right? Like we're always humans eating and listening to our body, and some things are going to feel good and others aren't, and it's a complete way of rethinking about it, right? Just like Maria, there's always going to be hard emotions. It's just learning to kind of navigate them and be accepting and at peace with them and comfortable with them.
It makes me think of 3 things. One, the importance of sometimes taking risks. Even if you have that fear of failure.
Yes.
It's easier to, not easier, it's important to, nobody's asking you to do something without fear. Just do it with fear and all, right?
Yeah.
So take risks, do things even if it's with fear. And the third one is grace, the importance of giving grace. Like, if anything, this podcast had helped me practice is giving myself grace. It's like sometimes I listen to something, I'm like, oh, what was I thinking when I said that? And it's like, it's okay. It's you know, next time this is going to help you explain it even better and better every time.
Yeah.
And I think that has been helpful.
Yeah.
For
I
me.
love that you said taking risks too, because I think it's so common when I'm talking to people who are interested in intuitive eating, right? And they're scared to death to give up the focus on weight, or to try something different, or to, you know, go about this a different way. And kind of like how we didn't know how the podcast was going to end, like where it was going to go, right? I would say it's evolved a ton since the beginning, and since maybe even our original inception of it. We didn't necessarily know where it was going to go, how it was going to do, whether we were even going to like it or each other maybe, right? But we knew that we had something to share that felt important enough, and so we did it. And that's kind of what I would share if anyone is out there like thinking about, should I give intuitive eating a try? Or it's kind of like, if you know that what you're currently doing isn't working great for you, taking a risk and trying it could change your life.
And here's another thought. From the mental health standpoint, the importance of group support.
Yeah.
In my case, I'm not sure. I always was curious about having my own podcast, but it wouldn't be something that I would have done alone. Doing it with you guys is so much better. There are many things that when you do it with other people that have similar goals, and it's like, why would I even do it by myself? You know, like it's the importance of connecting with people that...
I wouldn't have been able to do this by myself. I wouldn't have wanted to. But having you guys here to like support the journey and bounce ideas off of and like move forward as a group, like totally vibes with me.
Yeah, like if you have an idea and you want to take a risk and you want to try something and it's for some reason you don't want to do it yourself, connect with people that can do it with you.
Yeah.
And join efforts and do it together, and it can feel so much easier and as impactful.
Yeah.
We see this in fitness all the time. People that work out with a partner have much better results long term.
Yeah, I mean,
Much
that's
better.
why I train with you, frankly,
Yep.
because I don't really love lifting weights. I wouldn't do it otherwise.
Yep.
Well,
I hear
that's
that
why-
all the time.
And talking about your emotions with other people who can take it and listen to what you're saying, it's so healing
Yeah.
in itself, because you are sharing with another human being how you're feeling. So
Okay,
Yes.
so can we talk about the numbers for a minute?
Yes.
Have either of you guys, you know how we're not like tied to our numbers at all, I wouldn't say, but every now and then either
It's fun to like celebrate sometimes.
Yes. Every now and then either our podcast editor will send us an update on, hey, here's how the podcast is going, or Tara, now that you know how, you're the only one.
I've learned things.
You'll sometimes just forward that weekly report from Podbean. Have either any of you guys, and for people who maybe don't know, it shows you like where you're ranked in different countries that week, right? And whether it went up or down from the previous week. Have either of you ever had a reaction to those numbers?
Yeah. I definitely have.
I
like,
have too. Maria's shaking her head no.
when I see like, oh, last week we were ranked like 200 in the United States of all the podcasts, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then the next week we're not even ranked. I'm like, oh, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, was our episode not good?
Yes.
You know, or like, what, were our listeners on vacation or something and didn't listen? Like, it gets me thinking, like, what happened here?
The inner critic.
The inner
kicks
critic
in
comes
a little
out.
bit, right? And it so reminds me of the scale, right? You step on the scale and we have a reaction to it. And that reaction can really kick our inner critic into gear. It can send us into a place of self-doubt, downward spiraling. And there's been a couple times where I've gotten it and looked at it and like, oh, I don't like what that said. And then I start thinking too, and then I have to kind of remind myself, this does not matter. This is not why we record it, first of all. We're recording it to share with whoever.
I don't think any of us set out to be like, let's be like the number one podcast in the world. Like,
Right.
That never was in the conversation.
Somebody recently, I have a friend. She's so sweet. She's every time we're out, she wants to share with other people, and especially lately because we've been promoting that 1-year anniversary party that we have a podcast, and like it's embarrassing to me, right? Because I sort of like to fade away in a room, but she keeps sharing and telling and like, oh, tell them and you have something to celebrate. And so she was describing it recently. She said, well, they have like such a great connection, the three of them. And she said, it reminds me of Smartless. You guys are both looking at me.
Smartless?
I know now you have no idea what I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Smartless is a very funny podcast. You should listen to it. It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes,
yes.
and
yes.
That's hilarious.
the third guy's name is blanking on me at the moment, but they're comedians, right? And
Yes.
they're just shooting the shit and having silly conversations.
I love it, though.
They have guests on, and it's like an excessively popular podcast. So I was like, yeah, we're just like that.
There's probably like Joe Rogan and then them, and then 1.9% of everybody else, and then us,
Yeah.
and then the other 98%.
But that's
Which still feels like there's a huge gap between us and them. But
Yeah, right?
But that's a good point. I mean, because one thing that I think I appreciate from us in this podcast is our relationship.
yeah.
I think it's important to learn, what battles to pick or not, and how to divide responsibilities and how
Yeah.
to support each other so it doesn't become like, a heavy weight for one person, because it reminds me of like high school. When you do group work, there's always one that is doing like the most. And
Yes.
I feel, unless I'm wrong, and
Elizabeth.
but
I'm
feel,
not doing enough? Is
No,
that-
you're the one doing all the things.
Oh. Like, wait, what? You guys are just telling me now?
No, you're the one who does all the things.
No, I'm not.
We just show up on this day.
That is not true at all.
But if like we each can, put our own
No, I agree.
effort as we can and make it really a teamwork.
That's actually one of the things that I value the most about it is that, anyway, you work in the ER and you work in a gym, but I'm a solopreneur. Like, it's just me and my clients who are awesome, and I love chatting with them, but I have no one to bounce like the business ideas off of, or I have to be very intentional about going out and seeking that support. And I've done it in different ways. But one of the things that I love about the podcast is it's built in collaboration and support, and like it just makes it so much more fun.
And building the community with our guest speakers too is so
I
rewarding.
do feel like we're having we're getting a cool community around the podcast, like each other, but also our guests and our listeners. We hear from them. We love hearing from you guys.
Yes, we do. Funny story about one of our guests. About a year ago, the podcast had just launched. We maybe had like 2 episodes live, and I'm standing in the line at the grocery store that's like 30 people long to get my flu shot with my husband and my toddler, and I hear, "Oh my God, you guys, it's Tara DeLeon!" And I'm like, "Who the heck?" Because I'm like you, Elizabeth. I kind of like to fade into the background, and I'm like, "What on earth?" And I turn around and I see Gina Hahn, who was our pelvic floor guest a few weeks ago, and she goes to the entire line, she goes, "Oh my God, do you guys know who this is, who you're standing next to?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, get out of here, girl." And she goes, "This is Tara DeLeon with Wellness Rebranded." And me and Marcus, of course, are laughing, and she's laughing, and everybody around me is like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "What is that?"
That's awesome.
I'm like, "We had like 20 people listen to one episode."
That is too funny.
That is nice.
All right, ladies, any other lessons or favorite podcast moments you want to share or takeaways?
Well, I think not only our listeners hopefully are learning different things with our episodes, I feel that I learn a lot from you guys too.
Same.
Right? So if anything, if nobody listens, at least I'm learning something.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, you know what's the one, like the biggest thing that I have you in my head about, Maria, that I don't know that I ever thought about it that way before, is how you say there's no bad emotions. I think I definitely thought of like some of them are negative emotions and some of them are positive, and you have totally flipped the way that I think about that.
Something that sticks out to me is like, so when we started the podcast, I was new to like intuitive eating. And so I was learning a lot because especially in the early days, we did a lot of episodes on intuitive eating specifically. And so all of that was kind of like new information to me, even though I kind of vibed with it already in my practice. It was new hearing like the kind of guidelines of intuitive eating. And something that stuck out to me is kind of like similar to diet culture was, I would say something, right? Like call it junk food or something. And Elizabeth would be like, no, wait, stop recording. We need to cut this. Tara, you cannot say junk food on this podcast. And I'd be like, no, but you know what I mean though, right? And she's like, yeah, but like there are no bad foods. And I'd be like, totally, I know. But it would like stop me in my tracks, and I feel like with diet culture, right, like that rears its ugly head all the time.
So much unlearning and relearning.
So much unlearning.
Is what it's all about.
And we kind of have to be the Elizabeth Harris, going, "Hey, nah, stop that. We cannot talk like that. Get that out of your head," and kind of move forward from that point. So that's one of the things that kind of like mirrors podcasting and diet culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say is that I want to thank you guys again for bringing me on to the podcast. I think I said it in one of the first episodes. It's been 6 months with me already, and I feel honored, and I will always feel honored that you thought of me. And talking about criticism, there's something that this podcast has shown me, in my case, is even the imposter syndrome, right?
Oh, yes.
So many times I ask, like, do I really know this information? And I know it. I know that when I'm in front of a patient or, I know the information, it makes perfect sense. I can back it up with science. But it's a whole different story, maybe on a podcast and talking out loud about something. So to be completely honest, when you guys asked me to join the podcast, my imposter syndrome was, got really high for a minute. I'm like, am I able and prepared to do this, right? Am I the therapist for this? Am I even a good therapist, for God's sake, to be on a, right? You start questioning all these things. But how important is for people to remind ourselves that, yes, we are good enough to do. Otherwise, these two ladies wouldn't have asked me. And I remember that weekend after you guys asked me, because I wasn't that fast as Tara. I was like, okay, let me think about it. I was like, I love the idea. And for me, it was many things. It's like, do I have the time? I don't want to let them down. You know, if I really going to commit to something, I'm going to be all in. I don't commit halfway. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to do it, you know, again, with all my effort. But it was also thinking, wow, they asked me. They're probably like, how many therapists around here that they could have asked? So it's important to keep that in mind. People usually believe more in yourself than you do. And that needs to change.
Yeah.
So when somebody believes in you, take it and say, heck yes, I'm ready for that podcast. Let's do it. And here we are. So thank you.
Best decision we made about the podcast, I think.
Best decision I've made about.
Yeah, and I was going to say
Podcast.
one thing that I love about the podcast is, like, I knew you guys were both awesome practitioners, right? And that I wanted to do this with you. But also, I feel like now I've made friends that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
Like, genuine friends.
I actually really like that too.
Yeah, so
It's
I
definitely
love that
not what I
about it.
started. Like, oh, let me make a friend by doing a podcast. It was a really nice side benefit.
Yeah.
We can stop being friends if you want. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you.
And celebrate with us. If you are a listener and you have feedback for us, or even if you want to send a celebration message, because celebrating each other is actually good for your emotional well-being, send us a message or a recording and we will put it here on during the month.
Yes, we're going to be featuring them, and we have collected some awesome little just 30, 60-second snippets from listeners sharing their takeaways or what they love about the podcast, or really anything that they wanted to share with us, and
we would love to hear from you.
We would love to hear from you.
Hey there, it's Elizabeth. I'm going through my clients' weekly check-in forms and I literally cannot stop smiling to myself. I love seeing when they say that they are eating foods they haven't allowed themselves to eat in years, that they're enjoying it guilt-free, when they tell me how much more in control they feel of their eating, of their food choices, that they're connecting and respecting their hunger and fullness cues, or in the words of one of them, that they're just having so much more fun, feeling normal around food, especially knowing that they have these tools as we head into the holiday season. If you would also like to channel that feel-good eating energy, avoid a regret-fueled January food hangover that sends you rushing for the nearest diet, and rack up easy and simple self-care wins between now and New Year's, I invite you to check out my new email program. It's called Intuitive Eating Through the Holidays, and I will send you a very simple, very fast daily tip via email from Thanksgiving straight through to Christmas to help you eat intuitively, sidestep toxic diet culture, and feel connected to your body, along with some other really cool bonuses and goodies in this program. It's just $67. You can sign up now at the link in the show notes or visit elizabethharrisnutrition.com/feel-good-holiday-eating. And there's a dash in between each of those last words. So elizabethharrisnutrition.com/feel-good-holiday-eating. I really hope to see you there and cannot wait to help you feel fab about food and yourself this holiday season.
Thank you for listening. If you want to connect with me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Instagram at coaching_therapist.
I'm Elizabeth. You can find me at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition or in my Facebook group, Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tara De Leon Fitness. Guys, if you loved this episode or any of our other episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really, really helps us get the non-diet word out to the rest of the world. So please leave us a review.
Yes, thank you.